come from, the whole community could raise you. Any adult who caught you misbehaving could set you straight on the spot. And depending on who they were, you may not even make it home before you got popped. I didn't question it because that's just the way that it was. And I didn't realize that world was disappearing until one night when I was walking home. Welcome to the Always On Me podcast, where we know not everyone was born with a mic in their hand or a megaphone in their mouth, but we still have something to say because quiet is still a voice. Welcome to the Always On Me podcast. I'm Antonia, and this is where quiet minds speak with intention. If you are new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. Please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you do not miss future episodes. All right, so we're going to get into it. As a child in Jamaica, I understood the importance of respect. Respect and acting right in the streets. You were expected to always be on your best behavior because the street did not just watch you, it raised you. And I don't mean that as a saying. I mean it literally. If you did something wrong outside your house, any adult who saw you could correct you on the spot. And depending on which adult it was, depending on how well they do your family, you might even get a spanking right there where you were before you even made it home. Nobody signed up for that. There was no agreement. It was just understood. Raising a child was not one family's private job. It belonged to everybody. Everybody in the community was somebody who you answered to. It was the village. Now, I am not saying that every adult always got it right. They didn't. Some crossed the line then, just like some do now. I'm talking about the idea that adults shared responsibility for looking out for children. But it only worked because of what waited for you at home. No parent wanted to be embarrassed. They didn't want to be, the one whose child was causing drama out in the street. They didn't want to be the one being called to say, hey, come get your kid. My mother was no different. In fact, that is how it was when she was growing up too. Back then, there were no phones for people to call. And I'm talking about the hills of Jamaica. But word traveled fast through the community. If you were rude or disrespectful while you were out, people knew. And by the time you got home, your parents usually knew too. You were going to get it. You were going to get it twice, really. Once out there, once, maybe even twice when you got home. Now, for me, I was always quiet. I'm not kidding. I was always quiet. So I did my best to stay out of trouble. I might have had a dry or smart response every now and then, but nothing that was going to get my mom all worked up, right? The same was true after we migrated to the States. I was still Miss Goody Two-Shoes, according to some people. I wasn't a bad kid, but after one really bad whooping, I decided I like peace. I like peace. I like not being fearful. So from then on, I did my best to walk the straight and narrow. My sibling, on the other hand, well, not so much. The whole system was tested, despite the promised punishment. Me, I stayed in line. Then I came to realize something. The respect was still here, but it had changed shape. Here, it was more about family. No stranger could spank somebody else's child. That part didn't cross over, but an adult could still reprimand you. They could still correct you in the moment and then turn around and tell your parent. So your parent knew too. And that felt right to me because it was never really about the punishment. It was about the respect. And here's where I started to notice the difference. I would watch an adult try to correct a child, and the child would fix their mouth and say, "You ain't my mama." What? Right to the adult's face. I would have never dared to even consider doing that, not even once. Because if that adult knew my mother and they told her, child, please, there were two punishments waiting for me. The first one was for whatever I had done, and the second one the bigger one was for the disrespect. You can't go walk around telling people you ain't my mother to a grown person. At least not in my house. Couldn't do it. In my house, that second thing was worse than the first. And it wasn't just happening on the street. Children were saying it to teachers too. A teacher would try to correct a child and hear the same thing. You ain't my mama. Child. Something had already started changing. Because here, a child could pick up the phone. A child could walk into a police station. What was ordinary discipline back home could be seen differently here. Two ways of raising children, meeting in the middle and not quite agreeing. Years later, those lessons came back to me in a way I wasn't expecting. By then, I was grown. I was working full-time during the day and going to school at night. And one evening, I got off the bus and started to walk home. It was September, one of those nights where the air still felt good, but it got dark earlier than you expected. Two little boys walking toward me, basically going in opposite directions. They weren't from my community, my area. I didn't know them. I hadn't seen them before. So one of them said something to me, something very vulgar. The kind of thing a grown woman walking home alone should never have to hear from a child. I remember being shocked. And the shock wasn't because I had never heard that language before. It was because it was coming from a child and it was directed at me. I mean, I responded, right? Because I had a knee-jerk response. But I was like, what is going on? And my first instinct kicked in immediately. Follow them home. Find out where they live and let their parents know what happened. Because that's what we did back then. At least that's what I was accustomed to in my days. That whole system was still living inside of me. So I turned around. My feet actually turned around. And then I stopped because I realized I had no idea what I was walking into. I didn't know those boys, and I didn't know what was waiting behind whatever door they went through. I didn't know if knocking on that door would get me an apology or something much worse. It was dark. I was by myself. So I decided to make an about face and take my behind home. But it crossed my mind a lot over the years, right? From time to time, it would pop up. Part of me has always felt like I let the village down in some way because I felt like I should have done something. And it wasn't because anybody raised me to chase children down a dark street. Nobody did, because we didn't do that. But because in that moment, I wanted to do what the adults I grew up around would have done. That instinct was real. But another truth was sitting right behind it. I was a woman alone in the dark. Going home wasn't weakness. Going home was wisdom. Smart. Both of those things can be true at the same time. And I think that's exactly what happened to the village. The village didn't disappear because people stopped caring. I feel like it got quieter because caring stopped feeling safe. What brought all of this back to mind was a conversation I recently heard on the Breakfast Club. They asked the same question. Do you mind if another adult reprimands your child? And just like that, the room was split. DJ Envy said he doesn't have a problem with another adult stepping in if it comes from a place of care. If a child is about to get hurt or a fight is about to break out, he's okay with someone stepping in. But he draws the line at someone singling out his child or putting their hand on them. Charlemagne said something that stayed with me. He said adults are afraid now, afraid to correct children, afraid of the parents, afraid of what could happen afterward. And because of that, children don't always have the same respect for adults that many of us grew up with. Then the callers added even more to the conversation. One person said the village is dead. I kind of agree. Another said, reprimand them if you need to, but Don't put your hands on them. A school driver said if a child acts up on her bus, she's going to say something. And one man shared that after correcting a child, a parent showed up at his house threatening him over it. That's the part that stayed with me. Because the question isn't just whether another adult should correct a child. The question is, what might happen if they do? There was a Today.com survey that asked people whether it's ever okay to discipline someone else's child. More than 8,000 people answered, and it came back almost evenly split. 52% said, go ahead. 48% said, absolutely not. And this wasn't even a recent survey. People have been split on this for years. There's one thing almost everyone still agrees on. If a child is in danger, about to run into the street, about to get hurt, or about to hurt someone else, you step in. No debate. It's everything in between that's changed. The disrespect, the attitude, the boundary pushing, that's where most people choose to stay quiet. And I understand why. I've even changed how I handle children in my own space. Back in the day, years ago, when a family member or friend asked me to watch their child, I would tell them something up front. If I cannot reprimand your child, do not leave them with me. Do not. Not to hit them. I would never, if I needed to, but it never really called for that. But I need to know that if your child is being disrespectful, I can correct them. If they need a timeout, they're going to get a timeout. If they need to sit down and calm themselves, that's what we're going to do. Because I don't want to find myself arguing with a child who's being disrespectful only to turn around and argue with their mama afterward. Think about how strange that is. The village used to be automatic. Now it has to be negotiated. That still feels strange to even say it out loud. So where's the line? For me, it's pretty simple. If a child is in danger, yes, I'm stepping in. If a child is in my care, I need to be able to guide them. But I am not putting my hand on someone else's child. I am not trying to raise someone else's child. I am certainly not following children down a dark street. I still believe correction matters. I still believe respect matters. But I also believe wisdom matters, because the village only works when there is trust. And maybe that's what we lost. Not just the village. The trust that made the village possible. So I will leave you where my mind goes today. If I am walking down the street and I see a child acting a certain way, I don't find myself getting angry or annoyed. It bothers me a little bit. But what I do is I find myself wondering something quieter. I wonder if that child's own parent could see them right now, whether it would even matter. I don't have an answer for that. I just carry the question. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this conversation reminded you of the neighborhood you grew up in, or the village that you had, or that one adult who could stop you with a single look, share this episode with someone who would understand it. And if you are enjoying these conversations, please subscribe and join me for the next one. One last question before you go. If that had been you, walking home alone in the dark, and those two boys spoke to you in a way they spoke to me, would you have followed them home? Or would you have gone home yourself like I did? Tell me in the comments below what you would have done. Remember, being quiet doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you choose your words with intention. Stay muted, stay mighty, and I will see you next time. Take care.